Welcome back to another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap podcast with your hosts, Jodi Roscoe and Heather Fisher. We're talking about all things downsizing, from our own experiences with clients to guest experts. Let's make downsizing easier, one conversation at a time.
Hi, welcome to the Downsizing Roadmap podcast. Some move-out math today.
You love math. You're a mather.
I do. Systems, math. This is right up my alley.
I'm like, this is a Heather. This is a Heather topic.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about the cost, actually two kinds of math, two sections. The cost of not moving, and what that might be adding up to without you realizing, and then also the cost of moving with too much stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've experienced this one. So
yeah, I think we see that a lot, actually.
We
see both of them a lot. We see that people are putting off the moving because they feel overwhelmed, or they don't really let go of enough stuff and move with too much stuff. So let's talk about both of those today. I'm Jodi Roscoe.
I'm Heather Fisher. I think that with so many things in life that there's so much emotion. We're emotional beings, and there's so much emotion around things. And so on a topic like downsizing, there's a lot of emotion that keeps us stuck where we are, and it's hard to get through. And we give tips on that, and there's ways to process that. But then when you add a layer like a pros and cons list or math or any other kind of black and white way of looking at something, you can help yourself look at the emotion a little bit different and see things that may be good decisions that you were having trouble making because you're stuck in the hard, or you love something and you don't like change, or a lot of those emotions. If you're just feeling really stuck in those, sometimes just some back to school, some facts, some math, some pros and cons can help make those decisions just a little bit easier to get through the emotion when you know the bottom line.
Yeah, emotion can cloud your judgment a little bit, and my husband Mark is so good at this, like in our transactions when we're in our real estate transactions, like all of that, like he's like, take the emotion out and just look at it analytically, because that's how his brain works more. And a lot of yes, there's so much emotion in big changes in your life and all of that. So yeah, if you can reduce it sometimes to just more analytical thinking, it helps you see it a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, and then it makes it a little easier to go through the emotions, which we absolutely know still live alongside all of it.
Yeah, and feel them. That's okay. You can feel them, but still, if you kind of go through the analytical part, you can look at that path and be like, okay, I know where I'm going. I know why I'm doing it. I know I need to feel these emotions to get through it, but I know why, and I know what that cost is and what that looks like. So.
Yeah, and you know what makes sense to do.
Yeah, so the average homeowner spends 1% to 4% of their home value every year in upkeep. So, that can be $8,000 to $15,000 a year on house-related stuff, and some of that stuff is little stuff like your extra utilities and all of the things, but some of it's big stuff that needs to average out. Like you might need a new roof, or we just did one not too long ago about the different things that you might need to replace in the house, like when you're going to
all
fix
of those big ticket items are on just that life cycle that the replacement's going to come. No matter how much maintenance you've kept up with or not, they'll just need replaced.
Right, and remember that average home contains 300,000 items, so we know why we're overwhelmed and feeling emotional about it. But that's, you definitely, if you're going to move to a smaller space, you clearly cannot take all of that. And so what is that process? What are we going to look at math-wise of that? So section 1 is the math of not moving. So let's talk about not moving, because I think people don't look at it like that. They think there is no cost to not moving. Like they think like the status quo is like, okay, we're just going to stay here, and they don't see the cost because they've been paying the cost the whole time.
Yeah, I think there's a change that happens too. A lot of clients we meet, and if you've been in that house for a long time, you may have paid off the mortgage. Yeah. And so people feel like they're ahead of the game because they're not making that monthly mortgage payment. And the difference in the math is all of the little things that creep in slowly over time. You don't take them on as one big, maintenance payment, but you're adding a lot of things that maybe you did for yourself at one time, and then you start layering in services or other people to come in and do it, and those can all just creep in without realizing it, and you may be spending quite a bit more than you realize per month on your home or maintenance or services related to that.
Yeah, Mark calls them tiny little cuts, right? Like, so you pay this much here and this much there and this much here, and then it all adds up like the Costco grocery basket, right? You throw a few things in and everything,
and then
it's
you
always several $100s.
Yes, $700 for 5 items, it feels like.
Why? But it does. I think each of those things adds up, and when you look at each of them separately, you're like, oh, that's not bad, oh, that's not bad, oh, that's not bad. But then when you add them all up into one big number, it's a big number.
Yeah, and they rarely get added all at once. They come in over time in layers, and so we rarely, if ever, look at that sum total. So
Right.
That's a little bit about what we'll talk about today, doing that budget audit to see what has crept in and what's that totaling per year, and is it still the best math for your situation?
One of the biggest costs is property taxes.
Yeah.
And depending on where you are in the country, they've gone up, and sometimes they've gone up to a point where it's, hard to stay in the house,
Yeah.
Which is super frustrating. But the bigger your house is, the more your property taxes are going to be.
Yeah, and this is really a big consideration because you don't really have control over the increases or, knowing ahead of time how much it will increase, depending on, what area you're in, whether they're reassessing every 3 years or every year, or what that looks like, or levies being passed that change that. You can put your voting power to work when you can, but you're still at the grace of what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we see in some bigger properties where we are, it can be $12,000, or more. I mean, depending on the size of the property, a year in property taxes. Different counties are different, all of that. So, property taxes if you are going to a less expensive property or a smaller property, can be a big difference. And if you go into a different county, it could be a big difference. So you have to kind of look at what that looks like if you're saving money in property taxes. Which,
Yeah.
again, when you're not paying a mortgage, you think, oh, I'm not paying for the house, but you are, because property taxes never go away.
Yeah, or whether your move is potentially to a community or somewhere where you are not the one responsible for
you're not
those
paying any property
taxes.
Yeah, right.
So all part of that equation.
And we know there are some special places where there aren't property taxes. So, so that's nice. But some states have that, but not ours. So.
Yeah, so big concern for us, and if you're listening and it's not, then we're jealous.
Yeah, we're jealous. And if it's hugely difficult, we're sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
So we know there's quite the extremes across the country.
Yeah, but just knowing that it is different, like you said, in our area, it differs between neighboring counties, but it can also drastically be different state to state.
Yes,
So
for sure.
if you're considering a move to a warmer location or near kids or grandkids, it's definitely something to think about on whether that's a positive difference or, a
Right.
negative hit, depending on where you decide to move.
Right. Okay, number 2, utilities. So, the bigger the house, the more it costs to heat it and cool it and, all of that stuff, gas, electric, sewer, water, all of that stuff costs more when you have more square footage. And sometimes you can try to, block off some areas and not do as much heating and cooling, but a house doesn't do well when you're not taking care of it in that way. So, so you need to make sure that you are heating and cooling it properly, or it will degrade. And so you can't close it totally off.
Yeah, this is another area where increases are hard to anticipate how much or when. We all hear in the news and, in our own pocketbooks when the utility companies are increasing their rates. The only control you have is having less square footage that you need to heat and cool.
Right. Right. And that saves, that saves the planet a little bit too. Honestly, like if you're spending money cooling and heating areas that you don't even use, that's just, we don't need to spend that,
Yeah,
we just
absolutely.
don't need to.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that can save you some $1,700 or $1,700 to $3,000 a year, maybe more depending on where you are. And again, if you're going to a smaller place, it's going to be less money. If you're going to a community, that's going to be wrapped up in the cost that you're spending there. So I think some kind of that. Sometimes communities sound very expensive, and they are, but you also need to like take that math and look over like, what am I paying already that would be in the cost of that?
Yeah.
Right.
Or not need at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So the third thing to talk about, routine maintenance and seasonal services. This is where that creep really sets in. The other two are just a natural part of homeownership. But this is where we see you just start layering in what you're paying for as you find it more difficult to do certain things yourself.
Yeah.
You start adding services or just enjoy someone else doing it.
Right. I mean, you don't get up on the ladder and clean out the gutters anymore. And, you don't get up there and wash windows or any of that stuff. Lawn care, I think, is one of the first things people end up starting to pay for, where they just, don't want to or aren't able to do seasonal landscaping cleanup, mulching, mowing, all of that, tree trimming, all of that stuff, depending on what your property looks like, definitely costs. And I'm feeling that one right now on mine. I know all my trees need to be trimmed, and that isn't something that I could even do myself, even ever. Like that wasn't something that I could do, but it's a cost that has to happen with the house that I have because we have a lot of trees in the backyard.
Yeah, and this goes back to some of these things are just built into the cost of home ownership, that whether you avoid them or do them now, you're spending the money somewhere. That money's coming out of a bucket. So if you are at a place where you're just maybe not keeping all of the seasonal maintenance of the yard up in the same way that you did once, or weeds are out of control, or the grass is becoming all crabgrass and not treated and all of that, at some point, whether when the home gets sold, that's all addressed in either the price that you get for the house, and so less equity coming out of it, or money that needs to be spent to get the home ready to go on the market. So being honest with yourself too, are you already spending this, or are you spending it by not doing it out of your further equity, or having to do a big spend to get the home ready for a sale?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the things when we're going through all of this math, though, that we see is sometimes we stop doing this stuff, but we don't hire somebody to do it.
Yeah.
And then we end up with a lot of houses that we see with deferred maintenance, meaning, they should have had the HVAC serviced and cleaned and, whatever, but they didn't. So then maybe it breaks, or it's, maybe the roof starts to leak a little bit, and then that wasn't addressed. So there's some mold in the house. Like, we start to see those kind of things happening, and it's all everybody's best intention. Like, oh, I'll get to that. I see that gutter's, full, and, or whatever, which then can cause water intrusion in the house. So not taking care of it, can cause, we've seen lots of damage to houses, that just have deferred maintenance because it didn't get taken care of. And so if I was going to say, the bigger math, that's unseen math, we're talking about math we can count, like how much does it cost to do the lawn care and how much does it cost whatever. But I think the biggest unseen math that we see in this is that it's not done. It used to be done. We aren't paying to have it done. And now the deferred maintenance is actually causing damage to the house. Not just, yes, I didn't spend the money and now, I'm going to sell it for less money. That happens. But when on top of that you get water intrusion or leaking or damage, that costs more.
Yeah, and it can feel like small things, but even simple things like no longer routinely changing your furnace filters because it's in the basement and that's harder, or checking the salt in your water softener and letting that, just dry up and not be replaced. All of those things can snowball into much bigger maintenance problems because those mechanicals aren't being just taken care of regularly on the smallest parts of it.
Yeah, for sure. And gutter cleaning, water intrusion. If the gutters are full and the water's going somewhere it shouldn't go, like towards the foundation or whatever, water intrusion, water causes the most damage. Water is just the worst. And
Yeah.
so some of those things that don't seem like, oh, I'm not going to get the gutters cleaned this year, I can't get up there, so whatever. And it just kind of rolls on and you don't realize that it's been a few years since that's happened because you used to do it and you aren't hiring someone to do it. Just be careful that you're watching what's happening with the house, especially people close off rooms and kind of don't go in them
Don't
anymore.
see the water
and
spot
don't
forming
see
on the
and like,
ceiling
oh wait,
and-
the roof is leaking there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot when we go to people's houses because they maybe haven't been upstairs in a couple years, or honestly,
Not in those guest bedrooms
Yeah.
that no one's using.
and we'll be walking through every room, and then we'll look at the ceiling like, oh, what's that? And they're like, what? I didn't know that was happening. And so I get that. I mean, because it happens so often to us.
Yeah.
But that's something when your home ownership is really important to make sure you're walking through the house, once a month, every room, just kind of making sure everything's buttoned up and not, causing damage that then will cause bigger damage.
Yeah, and when just that checking and staying on top of it is starting to feel overwhelming, that's what we're talking about, is that conversation of, am I ready for, something a little easier to maintain?
Yeah. So we were just talking about gutter cleaning, window, all of the exterior home maintenance stuff. Then there's interior home maintenance, right? Maybe somebody needs to help clean the house because, again, things just, like, if you don't go in there, things happen on houses that you're not using.
Yeah.
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 And so you're going to want somebody to go in and clean, even if you aren't going upstairs. Maybe the cleaning person doesn't clean the spare rooms every time, but once a month they go in there and dust and make sure that everything looks good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's a cost that can really add up. A weekly cleaning, could be $120 to $180 per visit. That's a few $1,000s a year. If you're just doing a biweekly housekeeping. And looking at that, we know that that's another place where the expense can creep up. There's wonderful services that can, outside of just regular housekeeping, if you're just needing some extra daily care, there's wonderful in-home services where people can come for 4 hours a week and do, the to-do list or do all of that. But if you're seeing the amount of time creeping up that you're needing more and more assistance with someone coming to the home, we know that 24-hour in-home care is the most expensive form of senior living care. So just kind of looking long term down the road, is it my path to keep layering on more and more, or should I make a change now to eliminate some of these needs before?
Or if you're in a really big house and you might just need a little help, you can downsize to a much smaller house. Maybe a bunch of these costs can go away, and that can give you somebody in your smaller house to come in,
Yeah.
a couple hours a day to help you with something in an interim time, if that's what you want.
Absolutely.
There's just choices around the math. So once you know the math, then you can make better choices about what you're doing with the money.
Yeah.
So all combined in the cost of, not moving, that can be, $10,000 to $20,000 a year, honestly, like depending on how big your house is and what all you're needing to do, which is over $100,000 in 10 years. It could be almost up to $200,000 in 10 years. And so, as we said, it just adds up. So, and it's okay if you're comfortable and it's all working and you want to spend that money, just know that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just know where it is and where it's going and what that looks like. So, and then there's some hidden costs of, safety, risk of fall if you have stairs, the stress of, not having taken care of all the things, and having all that room means that you have all that room to store lots of stuff that you probably know that you need to handle, and that emotionally weighs on you. And so there's some level of emotional, not monetary, but emotional cost.
Yeah, that decision fatigue on, so much to manage. We see that come up. And if you are not spending the dollars on some of these things, but you're, having your adult kids help you with it, just that emotional and strain, just making sure everybody's on the same page and knows what needs done, and that, that's working out to good math, if people are stepping in and helping you.
Yeah. Yep. So that's the cost of not moving. Let's talk about the cost of moving with too much stuff. We see this a lot too. And we see this when people don't spend the time up front to think about where they're going, what that could look like. A lot of times we see this when we're moving in crisis instead of, having, we talk about starting early, getting dreamy about what you want to be, what you want that next future to look like. And a lot of the stuff that you have doesn't fit into that next picture. And if you have a good visual picture of what that is, then it makes it easier to let go of the stuff, because you can see like, oh, it doesn't fit into that picture. But if you haven't spent the time to do that and you end up having to move quickly, or you're just, haven't spent the time to really think about what you need or not need, then we end up with people who just move stuff because they own it. And so then they move it, like own it, box it, move it, right?
I think we see people all the time underestimate how long it takes to truly go through and downsize your stuff. And it's possible to do it in a crisis move. It's possible to do it in just a, move that's more of a whim or whatever. But the successful stories are people who are thinking about this a few years back, and they're just over time getting themselves ready for that future plan with their stuff, so that that's much easier. But what we usually see instead of that ideal path is we meet people and they say, oh, I'm not thinking about downsizing for 2 or 3 years. And they're talking about the actual logistical move. And so because they've given themselves that timeline of 2 or 3 years down the road, they're not taking any steps until it's like, okay, now we're ready, or now we're at the top of the waiting list. And it still takes time, even if you're ready. The process that is the least stressful takes time.
Yeah. So physically, movers cost, $120 to $180, dollars an hour, maybe a little bit more, and every 10 to 15 boxes adds 45 minutes or so, like or they're doing it by the pound, and then everything weighs a lot more than you think it weighs. Stuff weighs a lot. And so you're literally spending money to move things that when you get there you may or may not want, or may or may not fit. And I think that's the other thing people underestimate. They definitely underestimate how much stuff is in their house. Because they look around, and I did this myself, like look around and they're like, oh, it's not that much stuff because it's all put away neatly, like whatever. But when you start pulling stuff out of your cabinets or out of your storage area in your basement, the amount of stuff that was in my storage area in my basement that was tucked away in there, and once you start actually taking it out, I was shocked at how much stuff that was.
And if you're on that timeline, your option is the moving company saying, I think we're going to need to bring an extra truck over here.
And cost you money.
Here's what that cost is, because you're up against that, like, hey, we're moving. We have to be out of here next week, or whatever that looks like.
Or you forgot their stuff in the attic. did that. I did all
How
the
do you
things.
know that,
Yeah,
Jodi?
yeah. Just ask me how I know. Yeah, I did all of the things that we're telling you not to do because we've done them.
Yeah.
And so and we ended up moving quickly, which is crazy because this is our job, and we just rarely. We saw lots of houses, and we all of a sudden saw one. We're like, oh, this one is what we've been looking for. And so sometimes it happens like that. You don't think that you are going to move, and then you are, and then you don't have the time. So that's why we're saying, if you're even thinking about it all, just start getting ready. Just start going through that stuff. And even if you don't move for a while, it'll feel so good to be free of it.
Yeah.
Either way, there's no downside to it.
Yeah, no downside at all. And I mean, we have had clients, there are services if you're just overwhelmed with that sorting and packing and decision making. There are amazing companies that can come and do that side by side with you in different levels of involvement. But what we've seen, which I don't want to see for others, is that there's a little bit of sticker shock of like, oh, I have to pay this, per hour for this help, but then you still get mired down in the I don't want to let go of anything. So that math is like a multiplication at that point, because you're paying for the service of someone helping you, but you're still delaying the decisions. So you're paying for the movers to move it and the hours of packing by taking too much, and then you are unpacking and you're still overwhelmed, and so you're just paying over and over for those delayed decisions. So we can't say enough that making that decision early on and just being really thoughtful about what serves your next phase and only taking those things can save you that money and that math in multiple steps.
Yeah, I mean, when I moved here from California when I was in my early 20s, and I didn't think, I was young, I didn't think, like, what's my life going to be like there, like, all of those things. And when I got here, like, there was so much stuff I didn't want, which I had just literally paid to move it across the country, which is a lot of money. And, like, it's a different style here. I'm going to have a different, like, lifestyle here, all of it, like, so much. So if you're thinking, I'm going to move to a different state, does that style of your furniture even fit in, if you're in the Midwest, does it fit in Florida or Arizona or, somewhere warm? Like, are you just going to want something totally different? Are you moving to a place where they sell the houses furnished? You're not even going to need some of that stuff. So really start thinking about what that's going to look like so that you can make better decisions. Again, decisions are easier to make. We talk about this too, when there are parameters around them. Just an open-ended, like, do I want this or not, is the hardest decision to make, right?
Yeah.
When you put parameters around them, they're easier, which is why we want you to have that dreamy, like, what's that going to look like? And I'm going to have, I have 4 bedrooms right now. I'm going to have 2 bedrooms. That means I can't take 2 bedrooms worth of stuff. So which are my favorite? What am I doing? Like, all of that.
I think it's super important when you're deciding, do I want to keep this, that you're not deciding on do I like this
Emotionally. Mm-hmm.
But do I want to keep this, taking that a step further and envisioning, even if you aren't to the point where you specifically know the layout of your next place, just thinking about where specifically will it go and what will it be used for and how will it be displayed or honored in your next space. So you're not just taking a box of, your mom's stuff that you've inherited. You're like, I want to have a wall where I hang this picture, and you're just kind of visualizing. Again, if you don't know exactly your next space yet, you can still do that with that parameter of, I definitely, want to have one tool bench, one workbench in my future house, and you're kind of picturing what that will look like, and you're not just taking everything and then having to compensate on the other end by finding space for things. You've already envisioned that.
Just like the cost of not moving has hidden costs that I think are bigger. The cost of moving too much has hidden costs that I think are bigger. And so what we see not just the physical cost of moving too much. What we see is people feel claustrophobic in their new house. They feel overcrowded. They feel like maybe they didn't even make the right decision, which is not the case. What they did was they just brought too much stuff, and now we have literally had clients who were walking around in little boxes. The boxes were just little paths because they had unpacked into the space that they had, and then they still had all of these boxes because there wasn't enough room to unpack more. And so then they had to spend time some of them were just living like that, which makes me sad. Like that isn't what, the goal of downsizing at all. Or they had to spend time now sorting through it after you've spent the money to move it. And so you can't get away from it. So that's if you're at a place where you have to make a quick move, okay, do that, fill the garage if that's what you need to do, and do box, day at a time and get rid of it. And, it is what it is. But if you have the extra time early, spend it getting ready.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing we'll talk about is the storage costs, the temporary expense. And I think we see people do this a lot of times too, that they delay that decision from their house that they're in. They're like, well, I'll just get a storage unit and I'll decide later. And then they have their new space, which probably wasn't organized in a great way between the storage unit and the new house. And so you're constantly like, where is the thing I actually need?
Unit.
Yes. And then you're paying simply because you didn't make that decision. There are times when a storage unit is a needed step.
Yep.
Logistically, you may need to be out of one place and not another, or that it's not never a thing. But if you're just simply using it because you haven't made that decision, you are paying, 2 or 3 times. You're moving it from original house to the storage unit. You're moving it from the storage unit to wherever it is finally landing after you make the decision, and you're handling it 2 or 3 times and redeciding 2 or 3 or 4 times. And when we talk about decision fatigue and how many decisions we have just in our normal lives, and then how many more decisions are layered on in a move, if you're also taking all of those decisions and making it 2 or 3 times, it's exhausting.
Right. And storage units are out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
They are not like, they're not something that's right in your face where you're like, oh, I need to deal with that stuff because like it's sitting in my living room, this box, and I don't want to look at it anymore. It's like, oh, I need to go over there and deal with that stuff. And it's such an easy thing to put off. And then you've spent 4 years, 5 years, 10 years
Yes.
paying for your storage unit, which is thousands of dollars.
Yes. I mean, we did that, and, I'm pretty good on the mindset of downsizing, and I still got caught in that trap between our moves, and it's expensive, and it's a whole lot harder to get it done later. I mean, it is no fun, guys, to be out in a storage unit parking lot
when it's hot or when it's cold.
Hot, when it's cold, when it's raining, when it's anything, and you're not just moving it in and unpacking it into a closet. You like, well, I have to load it in my car, and I have to take 2 trips, and I have to, do all this to get that storage unit empty. And if the load is going from that to a donation center, like that is painful on your pocketbook.
Right, because you just paid to keep it, to donate it.
Yeah, and so anything you can do to minimize the amount of just rehandling things so many times will really save you in this math we're talking about.
Yep. So, we're talking thousands of dollars. We're talking thousands of dollars if you need bigger trucks and more boxes. We're talking thousands of dollars if you keep it in a storage unit. Again, if you are just, that's what you need to do, but you need to be really strict with yourself around getting through it and getting, not just letting it go over there to live, because unless it's climate controlled, which costs even more, things degrade in storage units. It's not a great place to keep things forever.
Right.
And so you're going to end up paying for stuff that if you have left it there 5 or 10 years, it's not going to be good anymore anyway.
Yeah. Yes.
So yes, don't do that. Furniture, when you get to a smaller place, your big furniture that was in your big house may not fit. And so don't pay to move it if it isn't going to fit there. And it's okay to buy some new things and spend, a little bit of money. I would much rather spend the money on something new that's going to fit the space and feel great versus spending money to move it and then realize that it doesn't fit there and then have to get rid of it and then have to buy something new, right? We're just trying not to double up on all the things.
I feel like we meet so many people, whether it's generational or personality based, of, well, it's still good, why would I get new? But it's such a great time when to just put that mindset on of, yes, it's still good and someone can use it that really has the need and the space for it, and it's okay to get a little bit new for
new
yourself.
chapter maybe maybe a few new things. Maybe you've sat in that same chair forever and you love it, or maybe you've sat in that same chair and it's always been a little uncomfortable and it's time to let that one go and move on to the next thing. But I think that's the other thing people miss. They don't realize how much less things that you will need in a smaller space. Let's talk about like Christmas stuff, right? If you have a big house or holiday, any kind of holiday stuff, I think people very sentimental about their holiday stuff and have all this stuff, but then when you get to a smaller space, you don't even have the space to put that stuff all out everywhere. So again, what's that going to look like? Each of those things need their time for you to look through it, pick what's really special.
I think if you're listening and you're, looking for a strategy to put this into action, again, it's visualizing that next space, whether you know all the room measurements or you're just envisioning, I'll have less bedrooms, less whatever, and shopping your current house with the purpose of decorating and utilizing your next one instead of looking at every item in your current house and trying to judge whether you like it and want to keep it. Like, really be purposeful. Maybe there's a smaller dresser, in a bedroom that you're not going to have at the next house that would be great, storage for tablecloths in your new dining room that's smaller than the current hutch you have. I mean, there's a lot of ways to repurpose and use things you already have, but choosing them for the purpose of where am I putting this, where am I envisioning, and what am I using it for, makes it fit that next phase of life so much better than just like, well, I just love all these things, so I'll keep them, but then you have no space to use or enjoy them.
Yeah. So you want to make sure the next space that you have is comfortable and it doesn't feel like it's closing in on you with all of your stuff. And, if you look at the time that it takes to go through stuff, you think in your mind it's going to take longer sometimes than it does. It does all take time. It adds up just like everything. But like if you have a pile of stuff in the corner, you can probably get through that pile in like 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah. And that pile might have sat in the corner for, 5 years. Or your closet. Maybe it takes 8 hours to get through your closet. But that is so much better than moving all these clothes that don't fit you anymore and all of those things. So just make yourself a habit. Like we say, make yourself a habit, 15 minutes a day, get through it. Sometimes that'll turn into half an hour or 2 hours. And sometimes that 15 minutes will feel like 3 hours on itself. But, you'll get your start, get that momentum and get that habit and get that going. So, okay. So we don't want you to spend physical dollars, obviously, moving things. That's the gist of what we're talking about.
Well, and furniture, talking about that it's large and heavy. So those are the losing items.
A lose-lose on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're just going to talk about that, your practical tools. Do a monthly check on how much money you're spending on your utilities, on your house, kind of, back to the first section, look at what that is, the cost of not moving. What is that? And then how can that relate to the next place that you're going? And if that place sounds expensive, is it based on what you're already spending when you add up every single thing? And then on the second one, make sure you're going through things and you're really only moving the things that you want, not only because you don't want to spend the money with a mover, but you don't want to get to the next place and have your furniture not fit, have all of these boxes that you don't have place to store things. That's just not fun when you get there and it doesn't feel good. Like the whole idea is that you're moving to have a fresh start and feel amazing. And if you do that, when you get there, it doesn't feel amazing. It feels still overwhelming.
Yeah, that's where we get all of the responses of, I wish I had done this sooner.
Yeah.
Because it does feel amazing and lighter and easier.
And you can hire people to help you with it. If really sorting and all of that stuff isn't something you can do, you can hire people. If you want to reach out to us at Downsizing Roadmap /com, just reach out to us. We have a guide that can help you /guide. DownsizingRoadmap.com /guide, and it can help you kind of get started with that. Or if you have questions, you can reach out to us too /help.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we will be back next week with another episode, and good luck with all your math problems.
Yep, she loves the math.
Yes, I do. I do.
Talk to you next
All
time.
right, bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on the Downsizing Roadmap podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who might need a little downsizing inspiration. Have questions or ideas for future episodes? Reach out to us on our website, www.downsizingroadmap.com. Until next time, let's keep simplifying and moving forward.